Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pull Focus, the cinema-based entertainment podcast where a couple of freelancers come together to talk shop. My name is Mike, and as always, I am joined by my brother in crime, actor, producer, casting, who's-its, and everything in between, Mr. Robert Andrus. Robert.
Oh, stop. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We're getting rowdy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
And also, everybody, we got a special treat for you. We have a special guest, somebody who is relatively important in my life. Actress, seamstress, prop master, and overall capable young lady. My mom, Miss Sharon Hayes.
Thank you so much.
Oh man. Okay, so you guys are gonna.
This is adorable.
This is adorable, right?
This really is
this
adorable.
Super cute. You guys have to give us a little bit of a leeway here because not only, I mean, when Andrus and I talk, it's usually like, hey, we're just shooting the shit and everything. But now I'm a little pressured to make sure that I make my ma proud, and that can be a little bit weird.
Intimidating.
And very intimidating. Very intimidating.
I'm just here to shoot the shit with you.
Nice.
I love it.
I like that attitude.
Yeah.
See? That's my mom, ladies and gentlemen. So we're gonna be going through and doing our usual shtick. We're gonna be talking about a chosen movie that we all have seen, and gonna go through and offer you some feedback in regards to it. However, this one I'm excited about this show because this is a very rare occasion where we're going to be discussing a quality film that actually has had some influence from a member of the panel. Mm-hmm. Andrus, we're going to be talking about the Mustang.
The Mustang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mustang.
So what's going on with this particular film, we are hitting the independent scene a little bit. Last episode, we hit Captain Marvel. Big Hollywood hit.
Was
Marvel
that really
Studios.
the last one we did?
Yeah, it really was. It's been a
feels
minute.
like an eternity.
Well, it is spring here in Salt Lake,
Yeah.
and as I'm sure we can both attest, it is busy as hell out here.
Busy
And
like a bee.
Dude, it is ridiculous. And just trying to get people to meet, having my mom come over to visit. We had this odd occasion where we had the capability of having a 3-person panel again.
Right.
And man, it's just it's tough, but when we have the opportunity, we're going to take it.
Love it.
Good.
Yeah. So we're going to dive into this right away. For you guys who don't know much about the Mustang, it is this really great independent film that was aired in Sundance, and we'll get into like how that comes into play in the overall production. But it is a movie about an actual program. This movie was inspired by real life events and real things that have happened and are currently happening, where a number of prisoners in the American prison system are not hired, but they are instructed
Rehabilitation
program
Yeah.
where they go through and they actually tame wild Mustangs. This was a really interesting film, and we're gonna I'm excited about it.
Well, the reason that they do that is for law enforcement.
That's right.
To use.
That's the
so
ironic
it's like
thing
full
about it.
circle.
Exactly.
Right?
We have prisoners training these horses who are going to go down to border control. We're going to go down to
Correct.
police departments that use equine services
Support.
in their force,
Yeah.
like down in the south. Let's
And
jump
these are all, as to my knowledge, watching the film, these prisoners who do this seem to all be relatively violent offenders.
That's right, Mom.
Right.
And they use this program not only to train the horses, but to help the violent offenders.
Equine therapy for
Right.
the inmates.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's jump in.
You think riding horses can change anything?
I'm not who I used to be.
You've been in isolation. What do you think about that?
I'm not good with people.
He's not good with
Dad.
people.
Why are you here?
I just need you to sign this.
How long have you been in prison?
12 years.
And how long from the thought of the crime to the actual crime?
Split second.
Robert Redford.
That's a dangerous animal. If
And we'll get into the history of Redford and Sundance. Robert Redford, who made the Sundance Film Festival, who made this film possible.
And hasn't Bruce Dern been connected to Sundance
For a long time, yeah.
You ready?
I stepped into an avalanche.
You must be a cowboy in no time.
It covered up my soul.
Hang in there with him. Stop that. You're really not that bad for a first time.
Our goal is to experience empathy
That's it, easy.
and to be open to our faults.
If you want to control your horse, first you got to control yourself.
I've worked with horses a long time. Some you can break, and some you can't.
I like this scene a lot.
There you go.
Great trailer for this movie, by the
Totally.
way. It's very accurate to what this film is.
Yeah, and it doesn't give too much away either.
Right.
You think riding horses can change anything?
I'm not who I used to be.
I'm listening.
Damn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, that was the Mustang. So guys, let's just jump right into this. This particular film, again, like quick synopsis, we have prisoner inmates who are in this rehabilitation program, and they're going through and trying to tame these wild Mustangs, a program that is still currently used in the prison system for Las Vegas, Texas, Wyoming, Montana, the country states, obviously. And when we go through and we see the opening scene, I think that it reminds me a lot of kind of like a Dance in the Wolves kind of situation.
Sure.
When this movie opened up, we're introduced to the horses first, into like this native kind of situation where they seem in the natural habitat. And then we see them also become prisoners, which is a metaphor for the human counterparts. One of the things that really, really made sense to me in this movie is that it made sense. It was easy for me to see how the animal and the human dynamic, and also, I mean, we have to talk about the Humane Society having a huge hand in the production of this film.
They would have to.
They would have to. And there are a couple scenes that we are going to talk about where I thought would be like a nightmare to shoot. But first thing I really want to go into is like probably the main point of this film that would allow us to kind of empathize with both the human and the animals in the movie, and that is that this feeling of connection we see from them right away. What do you guys think is probably one of the biggest dynamics that hit you first when you started seeing this movie? Like,
You don't see the empathy right away. You see the two individual people who are struggling to control their strongest, most violent emotions.
See, I like it that you said people, because we are dealing with like two different characters that come through. The main character, Roman, who is played by Matthias Schoenaerts, he plays the main character, the main inmate, and the other person was the horse, who was later named Marcus, who was the wild stallion that was brought into with his herd, that was used as a subject for this rehabilitation. It's really this interesting scene where it's beautifully shot too, like these wide angles. You see the entire valley. I'm not sure. I'm guessing they shot in like, it looked like Utah, but it could have been Wyoming, honestly.
I don't think it ended up being Utah.
Interesting.
But yeah.
We can double check and see the production notes. But it's this beautiful scene where you see these guys really come in, not the prisoners, but they hire helicopter pilots to
That's
come
the way
in.
they heard.
That's the way they herd them.
Horses
Right.
now. And cattle actually now.
Yeah, like the day of the cowboy is over.
Oh, yeah.
But when we see this particular film, and we're told that it's taken from real events, we're reminded that cowboys really still exist.
Right.
Yeah, even though you have the helicopters, you still have to have
the modern
several
day.
men
Yeah.
on horse to keep the herd packed together and going in the same direction.
One of the things that really was interesting to me was the similarity. Like I mentioned a moment before, the horses become prisoners. And then the exact next shot where we see Matthias's character is this really cool profile of where he's just sitting in bed, and all of a sudden you see like this claustrophobic 1-versus-1 where he's on the camera, and you just see one side of his face, and you just know what's going through his head. It's just oh, I'm here. This is what I am now. You know,
Right.
And this is the evolution of the characters too. What do you guys think was probably like? Did you guys think that you knew how this movie was going to end after the first 5 minutes? I mean, they do a really good job of introducing the characters. I think, at least the ones that you really have to care about. What was like the initial kind of impression? Do you think? I mean, like, did you end up being able to predict what was going to happen?
Well, I knew the story,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I can't answer that one.
We'll go into that for
Yeah.
sure. What about you, Mom? Do you think that it kind of foretold a little bit what was going to happen? We have a lot of metaphors that come in right out of the gate. A lot of symbolism.
A lot of symbolism, but it's sort of how do I want to say this? It's sort of in patches, you know. It's not it's not all sewn together for you. You know, you see the herd of horses being herded by helicopter, and then you see men in a prison yard being herded back into
It's the
their
exact
cells.
same thing, yeah.
And it takes you a few minutes to wonder what is the correlation here.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take too long before you see, oh, okay, I understand what this is. This is animal versus human, but in the same type of instance.
That's a really good point to make, because we have man versus animal at first, and then through the end of the film, they're both working together to find redemption, I think. Andrus, let's jump into it then. I mean, this was a Sundance pick of 2019. It was developed during the director series for the Sundance Film Festival.
Right.
Why don't you go a few years back, why don't you go into like the process of how that comes about, and then give us a little insight. I'm excited. I'm really happy that you can give us some insight in regards to the specific film, like how it came to be. Like generally, how does the director series work? How do the classes work when it comes to Sundance and development first?
Well, the whole idea behind the Sundance Directors Labs is 8 directors are selected based on their script, and it's a first-time narrative that they're going into as far as a feature film. And they workshop the most difficult scenes that they can fathom on their production. And they bring in all sorts of advisors and support to help them workshop those 4 scenes. So the idea is the scenes that keep them up at night, right?
Okay.
So my introduction to this movie was working on one of these workshop scenes with Laura, the director.
Wicked.
I don't want to butcher her last name, so I'm not
gotcha.
going to.
We'll have a IMDb link in the description too if people want to check it out.
Part of what I do up there is I volunteer with the casting. So all of the main players are brought in from New York, LA, or around the world.
So we're in pre-production at this point. Is that how it works? Or?
Way even before pre-production. This
Wow.
is still exploration.
Wow.
Refining scripts and all of that.
Okay.
So anyway, on this one, a couple of people were brought in to help workshop a couple of the scenes.
Okay.
One of which was one of the locker room scenes.
Uh-huh.
Another one was the scene between father and child in the
visitor center for the prison. Yeah.
Another one was the main character Roman's injury from when he gets hit by the horse.
Yeah.
And they've got to come in and...
Wait a minute. Was that... Oh, no.
Spoiler alert!
Well...
Spoiler alert!
Injuries.
Yeah, for sure.
Pending. I'm not going to tell you what happened.
Before you get too much more into it, I mean, of course, we got to throw out the message. Hey, The Mustang's a great movie. You should go see it.
It's actually quite incredible.
It's really good. But if you don't want it to be spoiled, if you're thinking about seeing it, you're listening to us first, stop, pause, and then come back. Okay, that's the last one you guys get. One more time.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler
Come on now.
nice.
You're working with a horse.
You're right.
You've got to anticipate some sort of injury.
But was that... so it was those 3 scenes.
So there was another one that's not coming to my mind right now, but there's quite a bit of this movie that's different.
That's interesting.
That's evolved from when we were doing the workshop scenarios.
Do you think that happens a lot? I mean, rewrites have to come through almost daily.
I would say, out of all the movies that I've actually participated in the workshop and then gone on to see in the theater, a lot of them have retained that integrity of what was done up there. This one certainly is the most changed from when we were working on it to what I actually saw in the theater with you.
Yeah.
So it was quite a nice surprise to see a lot of the differences and the changes that were made for the production.
That's interesting. I'm glad to hear that Sundance, like Sundance is part of Utah. It's part of Salt Lake.
Oh, for sure.
It's part of the culture
Yeah.
now, and it's really
Part
good
of
to
films.
Yeah,
Yeah,
honestly,
really.
Yeah.
and it's really good to see that the culture here in the city understands the need for development. And when we get the chance to work things that the director, the writing team knows is going to be challenging, we get quality stuff like this. I really enjoyed this film.
Oh, I did too.
Much like I think, Mom, I mean, you have a background with theater a lot, and also with like, you know, commercial and independent film and that kind of thing. My mom's an actress, you guys.
I love it.
How many times have you wished that you guys, when you were doing like community theater back in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and also when you're like doing things in Detroit and that kind of stuff, how many times have you wished to have a workshop where you could kind of chew on the most challenging stuff and get that smoothed out before you go for the main shot or opening night or whatever?
Well, I have the luxury of having rehearsal, so
Yeah. No coughing on the podcast, please.
No, God, no!
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
so and we rehearse, you know, scenes mostly to begin with for the memorization of the script,
Right.
and then secondly for the motivation of your character, which is entirely up to your director as it is in film. But in live theater, your performance can change.
Yeah, from night to night.
From night to night, because depending on how the actor is feeling that day, depending on the vibe from the audience, depending on whether or not you go up on your lines and your fellow actor doesn't know how to get you back.
I'm sure both of you.
You know?
I'm sure both of you could give me horror stories about how you've both been like, you know, going
completely.
through the flu or something like that.
Completely.
You still have to get up there in front of the camera, in front of the audience,
Losing
or
your
whatever.
voice.
Oh yeah, it's never happened to me particularly, but I've gone on stage numerous times with actors and actresses that had a
Had a bad
had
day.
a backstage person holding a bucket.
Oh no!
Off in the wings.
No, for
So,
sure. For the flu or for a tough
flu
night the
or-
night before.
Yeah.
That's something we don't talk about a lot
Right.
because we mostly talk about like the cinema part of stuff here in Salt Lake, but there is a
Right.
thriving theatrical community as
Oh,
well,
for sure.
and which you're also a part of, Andrus. And both of you, I mean, like I've dabbled a little bit here and there, but like when I was a kid, Mom would take me to theater camp a lot. Like
Nice.
I've gone through my own stuff.
Yeah.
I'm good. Never needed a bucket, but let's move on then, because like when we have the capability, then Sundance has been made for a movie like this, and I think it shows. This is a
for
very
sure.
like Sundance kind of film.
Robert Redford executive produced it. Right.
For those who don't know, Robert Redford is the reason that's why we have the Sundance Film Festival. Just quick note.
Who?
What?
Not the Robert Redford.
But it definitely has like a Sundance feel. Now, we've talked about that before. Like maybe like the first couple episodes when our friend Umberto Estrada was still coming regularly. He coined that term. This is a Sundance movie. And I didn't disagree with him when it came to the examples we had at the time. But now that I think I kind of understand that a little bit better. This is definitely a Sundance movie because it even though this movie cost some money, you guys. I mean, let's double check and see what the initial.
Not a lot.
$3
let me see.
million. Oh no, that's
That was the
it's
gross. Yeah, it's already it's moving up. Man, where do I find? It's at the bottom, isn't it? Well, anyway.
Oh,
it
the original budget.
Yeah, it costs money to make,
Oh yeah.
but we get like these really good.
Yeah, just go to Seymour on that
Trying to find
section.
IMDb, y'all.
Yeah.
When we go through and we check like the way in which this was shot, there's a lot of 1v1 when it comes to the camera. There's a lot of static moments that come through.
Yeah, it didn't say.
When we check and see the way in which this movie feels, I like it that I get like this independent Sundance feel from it, because I think it gives a lot of time for the individual actors to shine within their part.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the way in which this movie was shot? Did it flow okay? Were there parts of it that you thought
it
were
was done
slow or
incredibly well?
Can you expand on that? Like,
I mean, one of the main images that you see when you pull up the film is all of the riders in the desert,
right?
And there's an epic Western feel
Absolutely.
behind what it is.
Absolutely.
As well as a really claustrophobic, confined space, which is the other side of what
It's like
this
a
film
yin and
is.
yang kind of thing.
No, for sure. For sure. And I think that they did a really incredible job with all of the close-ups that they chose in the final edit, as well as all of the wide epic scenery.
Well, we were talking
that-
about it before,
that
like
we-
the initial
that we
shot.
get,
It was
yeah.
a huge wide,
Aerial.
wide lens that was
Yeah.
taking care of the aerial with the helicopters.
And you have to remember something too: the difficulty of making this film. Anytime you make any kind of a film with animals,
Oh,
we
man.
talked about that live
Yeah.
when we were
Yeah.
watching it.
it's
Incredibly difficult,
incredibly
challenging.
difficult.
So let's get into that, because whenever you're dealing with humans is one thing, and the cast here was pretty small.
Yeah,
Besides
28
the
characters
actress,
is what's listed, and that is tiny.
that is pretty tiny.
Yeah.
But then there were scenes in this movie where, again, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler
But
alert.
this takes place in a prison that's out in the West, and as I can assure all of you who may be listening from someplace outside of Utah or outside of the western region of the United States, when there's a storm and it's a big one, it hits freaking hard, man. You can't hide behind a building.
the ocean.
It's like, yeah, exactly.
Wide open spaces.
Absolutely. And there was a particular scene with this movie where there was a huge thunderstorm coming in, and they can't leave the horses outside, and they had to bring them into the prison. And the main scene that I wanted that really hit me as, oh my God, this was a challenging shot.
Right.
This is a challenging shoot, was when they brought over a dozen horses into a confined space, which on the set was like the lunchroom for the prison
It
or
felt
whatever.
like 3 dozen. It felt like
It
so
felt like
many.
more,
Yeah, it
right?
felt
So
like
many.
way
It felt like so
more
many
than it
more.
was.
Oh.
And what was happening in the scene is this thunderstorm is rolling through, and all of a sudden the power goes out, the lights go out, and these are live animals in here with these guys who are outweighed by an 1,800 pound animal or something in a confined space.
Yeah.
That-
And the other thing about that too, all of these horses in this confined space, having owned horses are not the most intelligent animals.
Well,
And they're very, very skittish.
Right, I was gonna
and
say-
spooky.
Yeah.
yeah.
And then on the day when you have flashing
They can
lights,
be frightened
Yeah.
They
quite
very
easily.
And a complete
Right.
blackout
Yeah,
too.
Right.
because remember they have an eye on either side of their head,
Right.
so they don't see what we see. They see this vision, and they somehow have to correlate that, and it makes them very skittish and nervous.
Right. In my initial research, I couldn't see any kind of we have to go into a little bit. As far as I could tell from doing the light research that I did, there weren't any deaths on set. All the animals were taken care of. I mean,
You
when
mean other than all of them?
oh my goodness,
So many.
so very many.
No, I don't think there were any accidents or
Because
anything,
sometimes
any problems.
when the vet comes and you get a horse that just can't break, you gotta.
Right.
We're gonna talk about Bruce Dern's my favorite scene at the end of the movie in regards to this in just a minute, but. There, as far as we can tell from our initial research, there weren't any. Besides maybe there was an occasional injury here and there, but the animals were very well taken care of. There weren't any deaths, which is great because there have been movies in the past, within this past decade, where we've lost 13 some odd animals or something like that. There have been things in Hollywood where animals have overheated. They've unfortunately had to been euthanized. As far as we can tell, that wasn't the case in this one. So I'm really glad to see that the Humane Society was able to. Be able to have a very big part in the production of this film and make sure that both parties, the horses and their human counterparts were able to get away. Maybe somebody had to step in some horse crap or something. I don't know, but
Right.
who knows?
I wouldn't be at all surprised.
Let's jump in then and let's
they
talk
certainly
about.
had to shovel it.
They
Absolutely.
certainly did.
Let's talk about the cast.
Yeah.
Because in true Sundance fashion, we are dealing with some people who are probably very notable actors, besides the obvious Bruce Dern, but we'll get into that in a minute. But besides Mr. Dern, Connie Britton, and I have heard of Josh Stewart, these are actors and actresses that I have never heard of. And the way in which they handled this role, very specifically with Matthias Schoenaert, man, I was impressed by this entire cast. Even because I think primarily one of the things you can really tell about the quality of an actor in my limited understanding, again, I'm not an actor, I'm more of like a tech guy, but when you give them a little bit to work with and it ends up being a huge scene, every scene where there was dialogue in here was big to me. What did you guys think about the casting here? And Andrus, we're going to go more into this when we talk about our specialities a little bit later in the podcast. But specifically, did you guys think that the actors did a good job of being able to make you believe they were who they were in this movie?
Oh, I would say yes.
Yeah.
For the most part, yes.
What do you think was probably your...
I think there were a few weaker scenes.
Sure.
Would you mind expanding on that? What do you think about that?
I think the scenes with the daughter visiting, I don't think...
I agree with you there completely.
You're talking about Martha, who is played by Gideon Adlon.
I don't think that she was given much meat to chew in this movie.
Well, and there's an interesting thing that I'm going to bring up about
Enlighten
that.
us, please.
So originally, when it was going through the workshop process, it was his son.
That's interesting.
His teenage son.
Why do you think they changed the gender of the character?
I think for a lot of reasons. I think if you make her a little bit older, you make her spoiler issues.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Starting a family.
What?
That there's a lot of dynamics there for a father to feel a lot more on his side of it. And I don't think it was necessarily her story. So I'm okay with the way that they actually portrayed everything in there, because I think everything in this is in support of his character.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So I agree completely with what you were saying about that, because I didn't feel the scenes were super strong as far as from her perspective on it, but in replaying it in my mind, they were very much impactful for what he did and where he was going.
Yes,
do you guys
absolutely.
Do you guys think it would have been a major kind of switch up in the overall story if it was a son instead of a daughter, as it was originally?
Well, yeah, because then it would just be a self-reflection of, especially if his son was going through similar potential threats of incarceration.
It gives Roman a chance of being able to imply even more empathy.
There's a more self-reflective aspect to it, rather than the whole biological.
It's less selfish, do you think? I mean, in a sense. I mean, like if we were to have
I would say it would be more selfish if it was for a son character rather than what it was.
I don't agree.
Oh, really?
Nope. I think that Roman, to a son, he would have been trying to make sure that his son didn't take after him.
Correct.
But as we all know, in the majority of cases, the son will walk right in the father's
footsteps.
Yeah,
exactly.
Especially when it comes to incarceration.
And he's in jail. There's nothing he can do. The son is more likely to say, well, then I'm not doing any worse than you, am I, Dad?
Yeah, I feel you.
Right.
Whereas the daughter, it brings out his protectiveness, much in the same way he protects that horse.
Mm-hmm.
So wise move then by the directing team.
No, I think so.
I think so.
Let's talk about it a little bit in regards to that, because when we dive deeper into the characters, one of the things that really resonated with me was just how much empathy I felt for all of these guys. And what's really interesting is there's a scene in this movie where a number of the characters, a number of the main characters are going through an anger management class. And you guys heard it when it came to the preview of the movie.
Split second.
They talked about the difference in time between when they first initialized the thought of perpetrating that crime and the actual action of the crime.
And they did a comparison to their sentence as well.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That half second, that minute or whatever cost this character 12 years, 20 years, 50 years. And one thing that really kind of resonated with me towards the middle of the film was how instead of seeing these characters as prisoners, I saw these characters as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was really interesting is I saw how that was a metaphor that was able to be pushed over to the horses as well. Did you guys have any kind of differences in opinion obviously you're going to have differences in opinion in regards to the beginning of the film towards the end of the film. Mm-hmm. But take a moment and explain to me what you guys thought you were able to... Were we able to learn enough about these characters on both sides, the good part of them, the bad part of them, to be able to truly kind of see them as more than just a character on a screen? Did you guys find these guys as being human? Were you able to connect with them in that way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, felt that I was.
What was the moment for you that you were able to get into that? Why were you able to see yourself as being able to consider them that? Because one of the things that I have a lot with prison movies, and also it has to do with the genre, like Shawshank Redemption, movies like Sylvester Stallone, that kind of stuff.
Oh, come on, yeah.
I have a problem with being able to emphasize enough with the characters to say, you know what? Maybe
because they're criminals.
Exactly.
They've done bad things
Exactly.
to arrive in the circumstance
that's
they're
years
in.
of therapy that
Sure,
I have to deal with.
Sure.
But I have a problem.
Con Air.
Con Air? Great example.
Thank you.
Great example. I mean, Nick Cage?
I know.
Come
Con
on,
Air.
man.
Let's just talk about it.
We're going to get off of this plane. No, sorry, that was terrible. But I
Well
do have a
done.
problem specifically when it comes to, these are bad guys. But this is one of the rare occasions in the movie where I didn't think they were always, bad guys, even though they were guilty of a nefarious crime.
Yeah, from my perspective, I never really saw any of them as a villainous type character,
Really?
like any other lockup type movie in the past. All of them, other than his cellmate.
Oh yeah, that was
His cellmate
Dan,
would be the exception there.
who's played by Josh Stewart, who is honestly, he's so good at playing a bad guy.
Yeah, no, he did a terrific
He did
job.
a terrific job with like maybe half a dozen lines of dialogue.
Yeah,
too. It was
not a very large role by screen time either.
Yeah.
So, but I would say that they really humanized all of the inmates in there.
Yeah.
So that you could empathize, so that you could be on their side for their
That's a great
redemption.
way of putting it.
Because I mean, playing it back in my head, really the only one that stands out is that Dan character that I would say was really a criminal.
Did you find yourself being on their side towards the end of the film, Ma? Were you able to see like some of the ways in which you could, determine it as being a human being versus being a prisoner?
I guess for some of them, Roman, of course, and who was it that played the
Henry? The guy who was the best trainer? Or that was
yeah.
Jason Mitchell. He did a great job.
Yeah, he did.
Best supporting actor
No, he did a
nomination,
great job,
man.
yeah.
I mean, honestly.
Yeah, he was just he felt human to me. He didn't feel like a prisoner to me.
I think one thing that kind of helped me deal with that a little bit is that they have this evolution when it comes to the uniforms a little bit. When you see Roman coming in, he's wearing the straight orange jumpsuit.
Yeah, and then there's a change.
Yeah. I think that is the beginning of Roman's redemption.
Sure.
That's the beginning of him being able to be a person again.
Well, and he's also accepting the challenge.
Yeah,
he's accepting
absolutely.
the position.
Yeah.
So it's not just handed to him; he has to earn it.
And speaking of position, let's talk about the command position that Bruce Dern took
Yeah.
on this. Mr. Bruce Dern played Miles. He was the head cattle hand, the main rancher, the guy who was there who's officiating the program for this prison. Bruce Dern has had a huge influence on Sundance. He's had a huge influence on film. I mean, this dude has done everything. And he's done Oscar-nominated stuff. Like he's moved through. He's hit science fiction. He's hit fantasy. He's hit comedy. I still watch The Burbs with him and Tom Hanks, and I laugh at him every goddamn time, man.
Love it.
Let's jump in a little bit and talk about how this was a masterclass, I think, from an actor standpoint. And I really want you guys to help me understand this to see if I have the right opinion about this. Bruce Dern gave a masterclass in minimalistic acting in this movie. He was able to, he didn't have like, the guy's like almost 80, so he can't have like, explosive like martial arts scenes and stuff like this.
What do you mean?
Well,
for this movie?
Yeah.
There were so many opportunities for that.
Hey man, I want to see a guy fight a horse.
No,
You did.
You did.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you're what?
Not Bruce
Spoiler
Dern.
alerts.
How dare you?
Spoiler alerts.
No, but for the most part, Bruce Dern's character is sitting in a chair giving orders.
Yep.
But this part was huge.
Yeah, and it was, to me, it was a little confusing at first because
How come?
he plays the old ranch hand guy.
Right.
But he's also in charge of these prisoners. But it was never, in my mind, established. Does he wear the badge?
Right.
That's a great point.
I agree with you there.
That's a
too.
great
point.
So ultimately, what I think his position was a civilian role.
Nice. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
he's basically there to support both the animal and and the inmate.
Right.
But I was right there with you.
Yeah.
I did not understand his role completely when he was introduced.
Yeah, no, he was giving orders and telling these people where to go and what they were going to do, like he was some sort of official of some sort.
Yeah.
But that was never brought out.
One of my favorite scenes is when it's when Roman meets Marcus, the horse.
Right.
And Marcus is, he's this wild stallion. Like he's the one who can't be broken. And throughout the film, we get these inclinations that maybe he will be tame, but ultimately he ends up not being able to do it. But one of the first scenes that comes up is the horse is fighting he's trying to get out of this cage that they've put him in, the stable.
A complete enclosure.
Exactly. He can't see the outside. There's
Correct.
very little light. It is reminiscent of the isolated solitary confinement that Roman is going through. And we're going to go into the metaphor about that in a moment. But
so many mirroring.
It's ridiculously cool, and it's so well done and smooth. But Roman comes in, and he's curious. He walks in, and Bruce Dern's character, Miles, comes in. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he gets him out of there. And there's this beautiful shot of where you see Matthias, who plays Roman, looking down on Bruce Dern, and Bruce Dern looking up at him. Because he's this older gentleman, and he's pointing his finger at him. If I catch you in here again, you're fucking gone, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And you can see how this is just a really great way of how these two actors, the quality of their acting, their body language, their commands. Bruce Dern isn't taking shit from this guy.
No.
And Roman, Matthias' character, is, you can see that he's holding his rake handle, and he's intimidated by this little old man. And this is a character who has committed assaulted murder on somebody.
Right.
He's a hardcore felon. He's been in the system for 12 years, and he's being pushed up on by this old cowhand. The dynamic between these characters is carried out through the rest of the film. Speak to me like how you guys thought, like the chemistry that this cast had, because I thought it was great. I really enjoyed how these actors were working off one another. Not just in that scene, but throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there was a lot of really positive, well-acted give and take in a lot of those scenes. I can't really think of anything that really stuck in my mind as a poorly acted scene.
Yeah, everything was believable all the way through, especially with the two of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and with Shonard and Connie Britton too.
Yeah,
Connie Britton,
not a very large role for her. She really only had 3-4 scenes total.
I think so. She played the psychiatrist,
right?
Or the counselor who was there at the prison.
Yeah,
maybe by scene 3, there was a power dynamic between her and Matthias Schonard's character, where she was telling him to sit down because she was trying to help him with his rehabilitation. Her character was the one that got him signed up to work with the horses in the first place. There's so much give and take, and I love how interesting it is that when you have the two inmates up against each other, it's predictable.
Sure.
You're gonna have an immovable force up against an unstoppable object, and you're gonna have the same kind of thing.
Well, and there's obvious conflict there.
Yeah.
It's self,
but
fighting self,
absolutely.
or mirrored.
Right.
Everybody's in the same situation,
there, right?
Yeah.
But as the inmate, he's got whatever dynamics he's fighting with, whatever the overall entity of the prison is.
Yeah.
And whoever's representing that authority at that given time.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have the female dynamic in there because we don't have we only have 2 female roles in the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
But they don't. The female characters, I thought, their amount of film time and the development of their characters, I was really glad to see that they were not any stronger than they were in some cases. The daughter, I wish, had been a little bit stronger, but the psychiatrist,
she had power.
She had power,
right?
But it was.
And I think
controlled.
Right. And I think I know where you're going there. If the daughter was maybe 5 years older, there may have been more power there.
Yeah.
There may have been more assertive nature
And it could
for
have been
her.
juxtaposed to the psychiatrist where you would see a similarity
Correct.
there.
I actually really like that they had her as young as she was, but she still felt like a teenager to me, which was the off point.
I hear you.
If they found an actress that felt a little bit more senior, like she could have been starting her own family after college, maybe.
Yeah.
This actress felt so young to me.
It's only because when I think one of the reasons as to why it didn't hit as hard as it could is because we've seen that before.
Yeah.
Giddy and Adlin did a great job of being able to perpetrate this character, but it's something that we've seen where we have this poor young girl who's on her own. She has a baby, and now she is forced to talk with the man who crippled her mother,
Right.
who is also her father,
Right.
and that's this whole movie is about duality and metaphors.
Sure.
You have these people, these characters, who are supposed to fit into these certain tropes, but they're actually trying to fit into like one or three of them. We have Jason Mitchell's character, who is a drug dealer. He's a criminal, but he's also a lover of animals. He's an educator, a teacher. We have Matthias Schoenaert's character, who, Roman, the main character. He's a father. He wants to be rehabilitated. He's an attempted murderer. Yeah, he later becomes a drug dealer as well. And we have all these different juxtapositions of his character that from if you were to step away from the movie, you'd be able to see that there are these two dueling spirits. There's this spirit of violence that all the characters inhabit, and then there's this need for redemption, for forgiveness, for acceptance. And this is the human condition. This movie, where we have man versus animal, encapsulates, I think, just the hero's journey for redemption in a lot of ways. The horses, and now we're going to go into a little bit, Marcus is a metaphor for Roman's humanity.
Sure.
Marcus is a metaphor for Roman's own forgiveness of himself. You have this horse that comes in here.
First.
Not at first. You're right. It's
Not at
developed.
first.
You have this animal that comes in here. It's wild. It's uncontrollable. It's violent. Roman mirrors this animal the same way. He's angry. He doesn't know what to do. All this other stuff. Over the course of the film, you see both of them go through this metamorphosis where instead of trying to lash out, they're trying to understand what they really are. And they end up, towards the end of the movie, finding freedom, quite literally, because Roman finds a way to help Marcus get out of the jail and go back to the fields. Freedom through their own forgiveness. Marcus is a metaphor for Roman's sense of self.
Well,
and
and
by the end of the movie, he forgives himself for being a criminal. And more
Right.
importantly, so does his daughter by the end of it. And he's free.
And the horse, Marcus, remember that part where
Spoiler alerts! Spoiler alerts!
Sorry.
where Roman pushes on the horse, is violent
Yeah.
on the physically to the body of the
Yeah,
horse.
when they first meet. He actually
He
right
actually
hooks him a
assaults-
couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
he punches the
and
horse.
then later on, when he's riding the horse and training the horse,
Yeah, he hits him back in
the
a sense.
the horse
It bucks
goes
him.
berserk and runs over him and pounces on him and could have killed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the horse saying, "I'll get you, mother."
Yeah, exactly.
Fighting back.
Yeah.
You're allowed to
Right?
curse on this
Yeah.
podcast too, Mom. It's okay.
Well, I don't usually.
Nice. Nicely done. But I think that's so interesting.
Censor.
It's like, it's like if you're, it's a trope that we haven't seen before, that we've seen before, right?
Sure.
We've seen people have and use outlier characters. Sometimes they're animals, sometimes they're not, to be used as a metaphor for the inner turmoil the main character, the main cast is dealing with. The thing is that it's done so well and so beautifully in this movie. I got emotional a couple of times watching this because when I watched Marcus finally get out of the jail, I realized that Roman at that point, regardless of the fact that he was still a prisoner, he still had to serve his time, at that point he was free. He was free because the horse was free.
And also, how much did he have to risk to do so?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there was serious conflict that he was dealing with as
If
well.
he finds out, Roman finds out that if he is capable of love, he's capable of forgiveness.
Right.
That's a beautiful part of the film.
Right.
And one of the most beautiful scenes I thought was, again, we're going to bring up Master Dern, because there towards the last scene of the movie, Roman and Miles are in the
Such a great
trailer.
scene.
It's such a great scene. Why don't you explain to us what was happening?
No,
Andrus?
you go for it.
Okay.
You go for it.
So this is after the climax of the movie, which, I mean, actually kind of happened a little bit late in the film, if you ask me. It was like the second to last scene in the film.
Yeah, it was
last series of scenes.
Really almost the end.
It's at the point where, so this program is made up, and this is what they do in real life too. They go through, they tame these wild Mustangs, and these Mustangs, as we mentioned before in the first few minutes of the podcast, they're sold on auction to other police officers, border
Rodeo
control.
style.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a showcase.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They all line up, they show their stuff, and it's their way of saying, hey, these animals are cool. They'll do what you say. And they're going to be good animals to incorporate into the structure that you have.
Right.
We even have the 1,000, 1,500, the auctioneer. That was great. What happens though is that, like you said before, Mom, Marcus bucks Roman off of himself after a helicopter flies over the scene, and Marcus has the horse has the remembrance of when he was
Horses with PTSD.
Exactly. I'm glad you said it.
You're welcome.
I'm glad you said it. And he bucks him off. It wasn't his fault, but just like Roman had earlier in the film, he's a slave to his emotions and he acted violently.
Right.
So he injures Roman. He goes through, and then Roman gets, he gets medical attention. Then he meets up with Miles, Bruce Dern's character, by the end of the film. And Bruce Dern goes through and he talks about, because of that, now we're going to end the program. It was
because
already
there's
waning. There's too much danger.
Yeah.
It's not a good investment for the. I mean,
Yeah.
we all know the prison system is underfunded anyway. Everybody, let's be real. Don't want to get too political on the cinema podcast, but this is a good example of that particular thing, and
there's too much liability.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a false narrative, but
compared to the end result of the pros.
Exactly. So
the
they're gonna
result of it.
they're gonna end the program. We open up the scene with Roman coming into Bruce Dern's trailer, and he's putting stuff away. He's sharing some memories for him, and this is so brilliant. You don't see
it coming.
even after even after Henry's
It was
death.
so beautiful.
Even after Henry's death,
Right.
Bruce Dern's character does not break at all. He's up front. If he's sad, he lets people know, and he lets them know, you know what, God damn it, that's the way it's going to be. I'll get over it. We have work to do.
Right.
But Bruce Dern does this thing in this scene where he talks about how Marcus is going to be euthanized, where for a split second, you see him break.
Right.
You see him get this look on his face.
He's pissed off about it.
He's pissed off
It's-
about it, but
it's
he's
unjust.
Also, it is. But
And
he's
that's
also
exactly why he was mad.
And that's exactly why he did what he did.
Right.
But you see for a second how this character who has seen horses die, he's probably put horses to sleep himself.
Right.
But this 1 second you see him break and you see his face crack and he almost begins to cry, but he gets right back up into it and tells Roman what's going on. And then he tells Roman how he can free his friend. And he just nonchalantly takes the prison guard behind the shoulder.
Right.
And they're talking
ushers
about
him away.
Yes.
Yeah, ushers him away.
And gives Roman the chance to free his friend and to free himself.
Talk about the duality. He was also talking about Henry.
Exactly.
And the potential of what Roman could end up as.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it was just so well done.
That's the thing.
So well done.
This is a great, quote unquote, Sundance film. It has limited exposure. It doesn't have any special effects. It's not a Marvel movie or anything. But regardless of that, because of the strong writing, character development, and the acting, this movie is huge. It is a huge movie.
I thought so.
It's got helicopters and horses.
I love it. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So let's step into the specializations a little bit.
Bruce Dern.
And Bruce Dern. Bruce motherfucking Dern.
Love it.
Andrus, why don't we talk a little bit when we get to the specializations a bit? Talk to me about how the casting process went into this, how, coming from a perspective of an actor, the challenges that do come in when it comes to doing a quote unquote small movie with small scenes and making them big throughout the performance. What were some of the challenges that you think the cast had to deal with regards to what was the quality of that, do you think, throughout the movie?
On this one specifically, where we find out at the very end of the movie that some of these actors were actually inmates from the program. And they did a great job.
They did a great
playing
job.
themselves or knowing what the circumstances and situations are.
Are you referring to Mr. Thomas Smittle?
Specifically,
Yeah.
yes.
Who was-
and I'm sure there were quite a few more that participated because they even gave credits to additional members of that program.
Yeah.
So, but talking about the actual actors that people would recognize and know and recognize, I think that there's not much as far as any real concerns or issues with casting. It's just finding the right group of people that fit the mold for what the movie is.
You guys are pretty much looking for puzzle pieces, aren't you?
Sure. And then the fact that it's kind of an international film.
Yeah.
Laura is French, and Matthias is Swedish.
I believe so.
Is that accurate? I think he's. Let me say, he's Belgian.
All right.
Okay, so the fact that I bought him completely as an American, and the storytelling felt very much American. It felt like a Western. I thought that they did a terrific job with it.
Excellent.
The puzzle pieces that they put together with it, I thought were quite accurate for what the story is.
Yeah.
I think everybody that's supposed to be hard was hard.
It looked hard, too.
I think that everybody that needed to have some sort of aggressive presence to them had that. And even like the group therapy sessions, I felt like that's one of the best ways to identify where some of the weaker links were in there.
Sure.
And I think everybody that got their moment to shine in there had their moment to shine in there.
So it was a good use of
I thought
time.
it was beautifully done.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
and I thought the cast was terrific.
That's great. That's awesome. Mom, you not only, act yourself, but most recently, you were, a props master for the Grand Rapids Civic Theater in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Let's talk a little bit from a production standpoint. This entire movie had this weird duality of both being interior shots, 50%, and shots from outside and like this exterior, thank you, gosh, where we had like all these ranch hands and everything. But those rakes and those jackets have to come from someplace.
Well, the jackets would be props, but
well, let's talk about them, like the certain challenges that you could relate to from production aspect. I mean, like how does one wrap your mind around? We're gonna need 10,000 rakes. I mean, how the hell does that challenge even start coming into play? Like, how do you deal with that?
all depends on your budget.
Okay. Honesty here at
That's a
Full
great
Focus,
answer,
ladies
by
and
the
gentlemen.
way.
It's a great
Yeah,
answer.
It all depends on your budget. If you have a script, you do your read through and find where your props are and what scenes they're needed in and how many you're going to need, and then you go shopping and pricing.
Did anything look out of place to you while we were watching the movie?
I didn't notice nothing caught my eye.
Nice.
That was out of place, but it was a very props low show.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I thought.
The one that felt very, very strange for me, and maybe you can tell me about it, was the photo op wall, like in the visitation room.
Yeah, they had
It
painted.
was so weird.
It was pretty weird.
I didn't understand that at all. That felt the most European, like interesting to me. Like it just felt so out of place compared to everything else.
Why?
I've never been to a prison where they've had that. Not that I've been to too many prisons,
No.
but it felt very out of place to me.
Yeah, it did to me too. I thought, what? Why is this here? Well, okay, so
I found it really
The
depressing.
visitation. No, it was uber depressing.
Yeah.
Because it was completely.
yeah, it was like these families and kids, and I realized, when I looked at it, I thought, okay, well, they're trying to show a humanity to these prisoners.
I have a theory about that.
By them being able to come into this room, but don't they only come into that room when their family is visiting?
So
Correct.
In the first scene where Roman is talking with his daughter in the background,
You have the other families,
you
right?
have the other families,
Yeah.
but you have one inmate back there, and all these ladies coming and taking pictures, and there are different ladies every time. In my head, I was thinking, this dude is a serial killer.
Well, sure.
And
why
he's
not?
getting all of these like prison wives or something to come in and take pictures with him.
Or he's just got game.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe
He's
conjugal
got
visits
game.
are fine.
But one thing that I was going to bring up based on that question for you with the props was, do you feel like the majority of the props were already there at the prison since they filmed at the prison and at the location where they actually do that training?
In that respect, yes. I thought a lot of it looked real.
Authentic to what the story
authentic.
was, right?
And I would say, of course, then, then I thought about it like, well, yeah, if I was propping this show, I would bend over backwards to make it authentic.
Yeah. Correct.
Even if I brought everything in and set it up before the shot was taken. But because it was filmed in a prison, I don't imagine that you'd have all that much access because little things disappear.
Right.
That's a great practical problem that might happen.
Yeah.
I would think they'd have to watch it pretty closely, although they didn't have guns or knives or anything like that. But still, you don't know. An inmate can tear up a washcloth and
completely.
make something to
Use
choke somebody with.
Any sort of weapon.
Any sort of weapon, yeah.
An interesting challenge that comes through on both the casting and acting, and also the actual production and the real props that come in, that I think are probably handled pretty not easily, but very well when it comes to the quality of production. From a sound aspect, we've talked about a lot. Right. Like whenever we've reviewed science fiction or fantasy movies, they're so fun because you can literally do anything.
Right.
The way that this particular movie limits your capability.
You don't have the creative license to do whatever the hell you want.
No.
But I was so impressed by the layers of sound that came into this, and it was a very complicated bounce, a very complicated mix, I think, but it had a lot of potential for stuff. I could see definitely through the outdoor scenes how there was ADR that was done very well, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For all of that,
Yeah.
because that's such a standout thing for me.
Absolutely,
it's one of my pet peeves.
And they definitely had the actors laughed. They had to, but there were definitely times where I could tell from my experience that they had people in the studio, and they do this trick where they pan away from the person who's speaking so they can put it in. But but the problem with bad ADR is that when people can tell and it messes up the immersion. That never happened with this, but I know they did.
It's always the over the shoulder, and you see somebody's jaw moving when there's no dialogue actually happening.
Another thing too is how they were able to use the space.
Right.
Again, you're limited because you're not doing fantasy, you're not doing sci-fi where you can do everything. But the fact that we had individual footsteps for when every prisoner came through, a horse whinnying over here that was consistent with the same horse that was making that same sound in different scenes. The continuity when it comes to the sound design in this movie
putting that together would have been a challenge.
It was on point, and I'm going to definitely take some time to go through the
find out who that was.
I had to look up the entire crew, but I mean honestly, excellent job.
Well, and I think that's also got to be given credit to the editor as well, because I think that's in tandem to the sound design,
which was
because there was no.
That's a very expensive microphone, Mom. Stop hitting the microphone.
What do I want to call it? Shutter. There was no shutter.
Right.
Yeah.
The scenes
seamless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This movie was we had cinematography by Ruben and Pens, and art direction by Molly Bailey. Cinematography is good. The editing, Geraldine Magneau, who is probably somebody who's affiliated with the director. That's usually how it goes through. And two French names, so we can assume that, I would imagine. But
wait, come back down to production management.
There we go. So we have Abraham Goldblatt, Anne-Sophie Henri Cavillon, and Christopher Ramirez for the different production management positions. And our dog is out of the. You hear that? He's giving his opinion too.
Animals on set.
But sound department is we have a lot of French names popping up here, and probably because independent film is a family, and if you happen to find people who you work with very well,
use them.
You keep those people around, and they handled everything very, very well. And in true Sundance fashion, we have great independent filmmaking, and just.
Très bien, très bien.
Something worth seeing, I think.
C'est la vie.
So, guys, we really do appreciate you taking time to listen to us go on, and let us, giving us some time to let you know what we think about stuff.
Go watch it.
Go watch The Mustang. Is that the
Please.
verdict we're
Go
giving
watch
everybody?
it.
Oh,
I
go
think that's
see
what
it.
we're saying.
I
Go
think
watch
this is an Oscar contender for 2019. I really do.
I hope so.
I hope so. I think it really is deserving.
And if you guys think that's something that you could go on, go and see the movie and find out if you agree with us or not. Go ahead and find out. Did you like the acting? Did you like the production? Do you like horses? Well,
Do you
if not,
like Robert Redford?
do you like Robert Redford? But in the meantime, after you're done watching the movie, don't forget about us too. We appreciate you listening, but feel free to listen to other stuff. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on SoundCloud. Go ahead and throw us an email if you like what we're doing. PullFocusPod@gmail.com. Because you guys all know we have a very, very, very singular message here. We might be wrong. We might be wrong. But it's your job to tell us.
Tell us.
Oh, reverb's so fun. Anyway, special thanks to my mom. Thank you so very much, Mom,
You're welcome.
for letting us know what you think about this movie. Thank you for visiting me and watching with me.
Oh, I'm moving in. I didn't tell you.
Oh, shit.
I love this.
To be continued, guys. Thank you so very much for listening. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.